I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened in Silence Creek. I need you to know that I wasn't stupid. I wasn't reckless. I was desperate, yes, but I wasn't blind. I saw the signs. I felt them in my bones, in my blood, in the cold sweat that woke me 3 nights before I ever set foot in that cursed place. I should have listened. My name is Sarah Caldwell, and I am 28 years old, though I feel ancient now. It's been 6 months since I left Silence Creek, but I still wake up screaming. I still smell the desert sage mixed with something else, something wrong. I still hear the singing. Let me start at the beginning, when I was still whole. It was August of 1891, and I was standing in the office of Mr. Thornton Graves in Santa Fe, listening to an offer that should have sent me running. The room was dark despite the afternoon sun, curtains drawn against the heat, and Mr. Graves sat behind his desk like a vulture dressed in fine wool. He was perhaps 60, with silver hair slicked back and eyes that never quite met mine. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "I understand you're in need of employment." I was more than in need. I was drowning. My father had died 4 months prior, leaving debts I never knew existed. The bank had taken our home in St. Louis. I'd sold everything except the clothes I wore and my mother's silver locket. I'd come west because people said there were opportunities, that a woman with education could find work as a teacher or governess. "Yes, sir," I said. "I am. I have a position that might interest you. My niece, Eliza, lives in a small town called Silence Creek, about 80 miles southwest of here. She's a widow, you see, and she runs a boarding house. She needs help. Someone educated, refined, someone who can keep accounts, correspond with suppliers, manage the kitchen, someone who can be a companion to her." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. The salary written there made my breath catch. It was 3 times what a school teacher might earn. That was the first warning. I felt it like a spider crawling up my spine. No one paid that much for a companion and bookkeeper. But I was so tired of being afraid, of going to bed hungry, of wondering if I'd end up in one of those houses where desperate women sold the only thing they had left. "That's very generous, Mr. Graves." "My niece is very particular. The town is remote. She's had difficulty finding suitable help." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Many women find the isolation challenging." "I don't mind isolation," I lied. "Excellent." He produced a contract. "You'll take the stage to Redemption, then a private coach to Silence Creek. Mrs. Eliza Mercer will meet you there. Room and board included, of course. You'll work for 6 months, and at the end, you're free to leave with your wages." I should have asked why he specified that I was free to leave. I should have asked why women found the isolation challenging. I should have asked why a boarding house in a small desert town needed someone educated and refined. Instead, I signed my name. That night, in the boarding house where I was staying, I had the first dream. I was walking through a town made of bleached wood and sun-scorched earth. The buildings were empty, the streets were empty, but I could hear singing, a woman's voice, high and clear and somehow wrong, like a music box with broken gears. I followed the sound to a well in the center of town, and when I looked down into the darkness, something looked back. I woke up gasping, my nightgown soaked with sweat. It was just nerves, I told myself, anxiety about the new position. But I knew better. Even then, in that moment, I knew better. The stage to Redemption took 2 days, rattling across desert scrubland where the heat shimmered like water and the mountains in the distance never seemed to get closer. I shared the coach with a traveling salesman who talked incessantly about nothing, and a Mexican woman who watched me with dark, knowing eyes. On the second day, the salesman got off at a mining camp. The woman and I rode alone for several hours before she finally spoke. "You go to Silence Creek?" Her accent was clear but evident. "Yes, I'm going to work there." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers working at the rosary in her lap. "You should not go to that place." My stomach clenched. "Why not?" "My grandmother's grandmother was born near there, before there was a town, before the white men came. She said that land was cursed, said there was something in the earth, something old and hungry. The desert has many secrets, señorita. Some places, the secrets eat you." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "I don't believe in curses." "Belief is not required." She looked at me with eyes full of pity. "You have a choice now. You can get off at Redemption. You can go somewhere else." "I need the work." "There is always other work. There is only one life." When we reached Redemption, a sun-bleached town that looked like it was slowly being reclaimed by the desert, she touched my hand before she left. Her skin was cool despite the heat. "If you must go, trust your blood. When your blood runs cold, when your hair stands up, when your belly tells you to run, you run. You do not think, you do not question, you run." I watched her disappear into the crowd, and I felt something like grief, as if I was watching my last chance for salvation walk away. The private coach that would take me to Silence Creek arrived an hour later. The driver was a thin man with sunken eyes and a nervous way of looking over his shoulder. He loaded my trunk without a word. "Have you driven this route long?" I asked, trying to make conversation as we set off. "Long enough." "What's Silence Creek like?" His hands tightened on the reins. "You'll see soon enough." "Is it nice? The people friendly?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "There ain't much in the way of people there. Not anymore. Used to be a mining town before the mine collapsed. Now it's just Mrs. Mercer's boarding house and a few folks who never left." "Why did they stay if the mine closed?" "Couldn't say, miss. Some people, they get stuck in a place. Can't leave even if they want to." The way he said it made my skin prickle. "That's an odd way to put it." He didn't respond. We traveled through the afternoon, leaving even the suggestion of civilization behind. The landscape grew stranger, more desolate. Twisted juniper trees that looked like tortured figures, rock formations that resembled skulls, and the silence. God, the silence. No birds, no insects, just the creak of the coach and the horse's hooves. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of blood and copper, the driver suddenly pulled the coach to a stop. "What is it?" I asked. He was staring at something ahead, his face pale. "Thought I saw—" "Never mind." He clicked his tongue and the horse moved forward again, but slower now, reluctant. "What did you see?" "Nothing, just shadows. Desert plays tricks." But I saw his hand move to his shirt, touching something underneath. A cross, maybe, or some other charm. We crested a rise just as the last light was dying, and there it was, Silence Creek, if you could call it a town. A scattering of buildings huddled in a shallow valley, most of them dark and abandoned. A church with a broken steeple, a general store with boarded windows, a few houses that looked empty as skulls, and in the center, standing alone like a queen surveying ruins, was a large 3-story building with light glowing in its windows. Mrs. Mercer's boarding house. "This is it," the driver said, and I heard relief in his voice. He wanted to be gone. As we descended into the valley, I felt it, the cold that the Mexican woman had warned me about. It started in my belly and spread outward, making my hands shake and my breath come short. Every instinct I had screamed at me to tell the driver to turn around, to take me anywhere but here. I opened my mouth to do exactly that. But then I thought of my father's debts. I thought of the nothing I had left. I thought of that generous salary, enough to start over somewhere new after 6 months. I thought of everything except what I should have thought of, that some prices are too high no matter how desperate you are. "Are you all right, miss?" the driver asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied, "just tired from the journey." We pulled up in front of the boarding house. Up close, it was impressive despite the decay around it. 3 stories of whitewashed wood, a wide porch, lace curtains in the windows. Roses grew in the front garden, impossibly wed against the gray earth. The front door opened, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. Mrs. Eliza Mercer was beautiful. That was the first thing that struck me, and the first thing that should have terrified me. She looked perhaps 30, with pale blonde hair swept up in a perfect arrangement, and a dress of deep green that must have cost a fortune. Her skin was porcelain white, impossible in this sun-scorched land, and when she smiled, her teeth were very white and very straight.
"Miss Coldwell," she said, her voice musical, "how wonderful that you finally arrived. I've been so looking forward to meeting you." The driver had already unloaded my trunk and was climbing back onto his seat with unseemly haste. "Wait," I said, suddenly panicked. "Won't you stay for some water? Some food?" He didn't look at me. "Need to get back before full dark. Good luck, miss." And then he was gone, the coach rattling away faster than it had come, leaving me alone with Mrs. Mercer and the dying light and the silence that pressed down like a physical weight. "Come inside," Mrs. Mercer said. "You must be exhausted. I've prepared the best room for you. We'll have dinner and you can rest." I picked up my trunk. She made no move to help and followed her inside. The house was beautiful. Rich carpets, fine furniture, paintings on the walls. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor. Crystal lamps cast warm light that should have been welcoming but somehow wasn't. And it was empty, completely empty. No other guests, no servants. No one but Mrs. Mercer and me. "Where are the other boarders?" I asked. "Between guests at the moment," she said smoothly. "You'll have my full attention while you settle in." She showed me to a room on the second floor. It was lovely, with a 4-poster bed and a view of the desert that was now completely dark. "Freshen up," Mrs. Mercer said. "I'll call you for dinner in an hour." When she left, I sat on the bed and tried to calm my racing heart. Everything was fine. The house was nice. Mrs. Mercer seemed kind. I was just nervous because of the strange journey and the Mexican woman's warnings, but my hands were still shaking. I went to the window and looked out at Silence Creek. Not a single light showed in any of the other buildings. The town was dead. And in the darkness, I could swear I saw movement, shadows that weren't quite right, shapes that were almost human but not quite. I closed the curtains. That night at dinner, I sat across from Mrs. Mercer at a long table set for 2. She'd prepared an elaborate meal, roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, fresh bread. It was delicious, but I could barely eat. "You seem nervous, my dear," Mrs. Mercer said, watching me over her wineglass. She hadn't touched her food, I realized, just sipped her wine and watched me with those pale blue eyes. "It's very quiet here," I said. "The driver said the mine collapsed." "Yes, 10 years ago. Terrible tragedy. 30 men killed." "I'm sorry. These things happen. The earth takes back what we try to steal from her." She smiled. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah. May I call you Sarah?" We talked through dinner, or rather, I talked and she listened with an intensity that was flattering and unnerving in equal measure. She asked about my family, my education, my dreams. She seemed genuinely interested, leaning forward, her eyes never leaving my face. "Well, you're exactly what I hoped for.
she said when I'd finished. Intelligent, refined, alone in the world. That last part made something cold slide down my spine. My uncle will expect me to write, I said quickly, lying. I had no uncle. The way he said it made my skin prickle. That's an odd way to put it. He didn't respond. We traveled through the afternoon, leaving even... Of course, Mrs. Mercer said. You must write to whomever you wish, though I should mention the post only comes once a month. The isolation, you understand. Once a month? I would have to stay here a month before anyone knew if something was wrong. Now, she said, standing, you must be exhausted. Let me show you to your room. We'll discuss your duties tomorrow. As I followed her up the stairs, I heard it for the first time. Singing. Faint, distant, like it was coming from somewhere deep in the house. A woman's voice, high and clear, singing a melody I didn't recognize. What's that? I asked. Mrs. Mercer paused, her hand on the banister. What's what, dear? The singing. She tilted her head as if listening. I don't hear anything. Perhaps it's the wind. The desert plays tricks with sound. But there was no wind. The night was perfectly still. She left me at my door with a candle and a smile that was all kindness and no warmth. Sleep well, Sarah. Tomorrow your new life begins. I lay in bed for hours listening. The singing came and went, sometimes loud enough that I sat up, convinced someone was in the room with me, but I was alone. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps that paused outside my door. I held my breath, watching the thin line of light under the door, waiting for it to open. It didn't. After a long moment, the footsteps moved on. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, feeling my heart pound, feeling that cold certainty in my belly grow stronger and stronger. I should leave. I should walk out of here at first light and not look back. But where would I go? I had no money for the stage, no way to survive the 80-mile journey back to redemption on foot, no prospects, no future, nothing. I was trapped, and somewhere in the darkness, I heard laughter that might have been the wind, or might not have been. Morning came bright and merciless, the sun turning my room into an oven by 7 o'clock. I rose, dressed, and made my way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Mrs. Mercer was in the kitchen, looking as fresh and perfect as she had the night before. Her dress was different, pale yellow this time, but just as expensive. She smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, dear. I hope you slept well." "Yes, thank you," I lied. "Wonderful. Breakfast is ready. We'll eat, and then I'll explain your duties." We ate in the dining room again, just the two of us at that long table. I was ravenous despite my unease, and the food was excellent. Mrs. Mercer picked at her plate, barely eating, watching me instead. "Now then," she said, standing, "let me tell you what I expect. Your primary responsibilities will be managing the accounts, corresponding with suppliers, and helping me maintain the house. When we have guests, which we will soon, I'm assured, you'll help me serve meals and ensure their comfort." "How many guests do you usually have?" "It varies. Sometimes none for months, sometimes the house is full. Men passing through, mostly, prospectors hoping to find what the mine missed, travelers, occasionally families looking to start fresh somewhere the world has forgotten." Something about the way she said that last part made my skin crawl. "I should also tell you the rules," she continued. "They're simple, but very important. First, you're free to go anywhere on the first and second floors, but the third floor is my private residence. You're not to go up there under any circumstances." I nodded. That seemed reasonable enough. "Second, you're not to leave the house after sunset. The desert is dangerous at night. Animals, you understand. And worse." "Worse?" She waved her hand dismissively. Drifters, dangerous men, the kind who prey on women alone. Better to stay inside after dark. All right. Third, if you hear anything strange at night, noises, voices, singing, you're to ignore it. Close your door, put a pillow over your head if you must, but don't investigate. The house is old and it settles. The wind plays tricks. Your imagination will run wild if you let it. The singing. She was telling me to ignore the singing. Is there anyone else here? I thought I heard footsteps in the hall last night. Just you and me, dear. You must have been dreaming. She stood. Come, let me show you the accounts. We spent the morning in a small office off the kitchen. Mrs. Mercer's records were meticulous but strange. Lists of supplies ordered, always in large quantities. Food, water, linens, candles, but no record of guests, no income shown, no explanation for where the money came to maintain such a large establishment. Where do your funds come from? I asked, trying to sound casual. My late husband left me well provided for, and my uncle is generous. She smiled. I don't need to run the boarding house for profit, Sarah. I do it because I enjoy the company. But there was no company, just an empty house in a dead town. I didn't press the issue. That afternoon, Mrs. Mercer left me alone to organize the pantry while she attended to some business upstairs. I worked in silence, listening to the house creak and settle around me. And then, from somewhere above, I heard it again. Singing. It was louder this time, clearer, a woman's voice, but not Mrs. Mercer's. The melody was strange, rising and falling in patterns that didn't quite make sense. And the words, when I could make them out, weren't in English, weren't in any language I recognized. I stood frozen in the pantry, my heart hammering. Don't investigate, Mrs. Mercer had said. Ignore it. But I couldn't. That voice was full of such anguish, such desperate pleading that I felt pulled toward it like a moth to flame. I left the pantry and climbed the main stairs to the 3rd floor. The singing was coming above, from the 3rd floor, where I was forbidden to go. I stood at the base of the narrow staircase that led up to Mrs. Mercer's private residence, my hand on the banister. The singing was so clear now, so beautiful and terrible. It sounded like a prayer, like a warning, like a cry for help. I put my foot on the first step. Sarah? I spun around. Mrs. Mercer stood at the end of the hallway, her face calm but her eyes cold as winter. I thought I made the rules clear. I heard singing. I thought someone might need help. There's no one here but us. What you heard was the wind, or your imagination, or the house settling, but it was not an invitation to break my rules. She walked toward me and I backed away from the stairs. I understand you're new here. I understand the isolation can be disorienting, so I'll forgive this lapse. But Sarah, dear, if you break my rules again, there will be consequences. Do you understand? I nodded, my mouth dry. Good. Now go back to your work, and remember what I told you. Ignore the noises, for your own safety. That night, I lay in bed listening to the singing. It went on for hours, that mournful, desperate voice. And I heard other things too. Footsteps on the floor above me, something being dragged across wood, a sound that might have been crying. I pulled the pillow over my head like Mrs. Mercer had suggested, but I could still hear it. And I knew with absolute certainty that someone was trapped up there, someone who needed help. I should have run that night, should have taken my chances with the desert, with the 80 miles to redemption, with dying of thirst or getting lost. because staying in that house, with its rules and its secrets and its singing, was worse than any death the desert could offer. But I didn't run. I told myself I needed more information, more proof. I told myself I needed to be smart, to plan. I told myself lies to cover the truth, that I was afraid, not just of what might happen if I left, but of what I might find if I stayed. Fear makes you foolish, and I was about to become very foolish indeed. 3 days passed in a strange routine. I worked during the day, managing accounts that made no sense, organizing supplies we would never use, preparing rooms for guests who never came. Mrs. Mercer was pleasant, almost motherly, teaching me her preferences and praising my work. And at night I heard the singing. Always at night, always from the 3rd floor. Sometimes it was the same voice I'd heard before. Sometimes it was different voices, multiple women singing in harmony that was discordant and wrong. And sometimes there were no words at all, just screaming. I began to explore the house during the day when Mrs. Mercer left me alone. The 1st floor was ordinary enough. Kitchen, dining room, parlor, library, several guest rooms. The 2nd floor, where I slept, had 6 more bedrooms, all beautifully furnished but clearly unused for years. And everywhere, in every room, I found things that didn't belong. A woman's hairbrush with long black hair still tangled in the bristles, hidden in a drawer. A diary with entries in Spanish, the last one dated 5 years ago, shoved under a mattress. A pair of spectacles in a bedside table. A silver locket, not unlike my own, containing a photograph of a young woman abandoned in a wardrobe. Personal items, left behind or taken. I found 7 such caches in the guest rooms, 7 women who had been here before me. On the 4th night, I was awakened not by singing, but with a sound at my door, a soft scratching, like fingernails on wood. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Scratch, scratch, scratch. "Who's there?" I whispered. The scratching stopped. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. "Run." I threw back my covers and ran to the door, yanking it open. The hallway was empty, but on my door, carved into the wood in crude, desperate letters, was a single word: liars. I traced my fingers over the carved letters, my hand shaking. This hadn't been here when I went to bed. Someone had done this in the last few hours while I slept, or tried to warn me while I still could escape. The next morning, I watched Mrs. Mercer carefully at breakfast. She seemed the same as always, elegant, composed, friendly. But I noticed things I hadn't before. She never ate, just moved food around her plate. Her skin was so pale it was almost translucent, and in certain lights I could see blue veins beneath her. And her eyes, when she thought I wasn't looking, were flat and dead as a snake's. "You seem distracted, dear. Are you feeling well?" "Just tired. I'm not sleeping well." "The altitude, perhaps, or the silence. People who aren't used to true quiet often find it disturbing. Have a bacon. You'll adjust." "Mrs. Mercer, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "You had business in one of the other buildings yesterday. I was wondering what else is here." "Old managers' houses, storage facilities. Nothing of interest to you." "Mrs. Mercer, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why don't you have any servants? Surely a house this size requires more than one person to maintain." Her hand paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "I prefer to keep my household small. I value privacy, And I find that most people can't tolerate the isolation. They leave, sometimes quite suddenly, without even collecting their wages. That seems wasteful. I pay well enough that I can afford to be wasteful. Her eyes met mine. Is there a problem, Sarah? Are you considering leaving? No, I said quickly. I'm just curious. Curiosity is dangerous in a place like this. It leads people to stick their noses where they don't belong, to go places they shouldn't go, to learn things that would be better left unknown. It was a warning delivered with a smile. That afternoon, Mrs. Mercer announced she had business in one of the other buildings and would be gone for several hours. She left me with a list of tasks, and as soon as she was out the door, I abandoned all them.
I was going to the 3rd floor. The narrow staircase was at the back of the house, behind a door that Mrs. Mercer kept locked. But I'd watched her, and I knew she kept the key in her pocket during the day and hung it on a hook in her bedroom at night. Getting into her bedroom meant breaking another rule, but I was past caring about rules. Mrs. Mercer's room was on the 2nd floor, at the end of the hall. I'd never been inside, but the door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was beautiful and horrifying. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, women, all of them young, all of them alone, all of them staring at the camera with expressions that ranged from hope to fear to blank resignation. I recognized some of them from the personal items I'd found: the woman with the Spanish diary, the owner of the spectacles. Others I didn't know. And at the center of the wall, in a place of prominence, was an empty space, a single nail, waiting for a photograph, waiting for mine. I tore my eyes away from the wall and searched for the key. I found it in a jewelry box on her dresser, along with other keys I didn't recognize, and a collection of lockets like mine. 7 of them, each containing a different face. The faces of the women from the photographs. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the key. I grabbed it and ran from the room, down the hall to the back staircase. The lock turned smoothly, as if it was used often, as if Mrs. Mercer went up there regularly. The stairs creaked under my feet. The air grew colder with each step, and I could smell something wrong. Decay and roses and something else, something sweet and rotten. At the top of the stairs was another door. This one wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped into hell. The 3rd floor was one large room, and it was a prison. The windows were boarded over. The walls were covered in scratches, gouges, desperate carvings, names, dates, prayers in different languages, and everywhere the same word over and over: help. There were chains bolted to the walls, 7 sets of them, hanging empty, and in the corner, huddled together like frightened animals, were 3 women. They looked up when I entered, their eyes wild with hope and terror. They were thin, filthy, dressed in rags. One of them had dark hair and Spanish features, the woman from the diary. Another wore broken spectacles held together with wire. The 3rd was so emaciated I could barely tell she was human. "Please," the Spanish woman whispered, "please, you must help us." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what I was seeing. "How long have you been here?" I finally managed. "I don't know," the woman with spectacles said. Her voice was hollow, broken. "Years. She brings us food, keeps us alive, but not to be kind." "Why? What does she want?" "She feeds on us, not our blood, our fear, our despair, our hope. She keeps us here and she feeds on what we feel, and she'll keep feeding until there's nothing left, until we're empty." "That's insane." "Look around you. Does this look sane? She's done this before, many times. The chains on the walls, each one held a woman like us. Women she drained until they were nothing, until they died or went mad.
We're the only ones left from her last harvest. Why are you still alive? Because new meat arrived, the woman with spectacles said, looking at me with pity. She'll focus on you now, feed on your fear while we recover enough to be interesting again. That's how she works, cycles us, keeps some of us alive to maximize her feeding. I backed toward the door. I'll get help. I'll go to Redemption, bring back the Marshal. There is no Marshal. There's barely a Redemption, and she'll catch you before you get a mile. She's not human, girl. She's something old, something that was here before the town, before the mine. The miners dug too deep, and they found her sleeping in the earth. They tried to kill her, and she killed them all. 30 men died in that mine collapse, yes, but not because of bad engineering. They died because she wanted them dead. Then how do we escape? We don't, the emaciated woman said flatly. We survive. That's all we can do. No, I shook my head. There has to be a way. I won't accept this. I won't. I heard steps on the stairs. Mrs. Mercer's voice drifted up, pleasant as always. Sarah, where are you, dear? I'm back early. The 3 women scrambled back to their corner, their eyes wide with terror. The Spanish woman grabbed my arm. Whatever you do, don't let her know you came up here. Not yet. You're still free, still mobile. You're our only chance. But you have to be smart. You have to wait for the right moment. I ran for the door, closed it silently behind me, and flew down the stairs. I barely had time to lock the door and slip the key into my pocket before Mrs. Mercer appeared in the hallway. There you are, she said, smiling. What are you doing back here? I thought I heard a mouse. I was trying to find where it went. She studied me for a long moment, and I felt her gaze like ice on my skin. Could she tell I was lying? Could she smell the fear pouring off me? Did you find it? No, it got away. Pity, we can't have mice in the house. She turned and walked toward the kitchen, and I followed on shaking legs. Come, let's have tea. You look pale. We sat in the parlor, and she poured tea from a china pot, and we talked about nothing while I tried not to scream. She was a monster, a thing that fed on suffering, and I was trapped here with her, along with 3 other women she'd already broken. But I wasn't broken yet, and I wasn't going to let her break me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my room with a chair braced against the door and thought about what the women had told me. Mrs. Mercer, or whatever she really was, fed on fear and despair. She kept women prisoner, cycling through them, draining them of emotion and life until they were empty husks. She'd been doing this for years, maybe decades, maybe longer. And I had walked right into her trap. But I had advantages the other women hadn't had. I knew the truth now. I was still free to move around, and I had allies, even if they were weakened and terrified. I needed a plan. Over the next few days, I played the role of the perfect employee. I smiled at Mrs. Mercer, I did my work, I asked no questions, and whenever she left me alone, I searched the house for anything that might help us escape. I found useful things, kitchen knives, which I hid in my room, matches, rope, a map in the library that showed the route to Redemption. But I also found things that made my blood run cold. In a locked drawer in Mrs. Mercer's office, I'd found the right key among her collection, I discovered journals. Her journals, written in a spidery hand that covered hundreds of pages. They went back over a century. She'd been many people in that time, many names, always a widow, always running a boarding house or inn or hotel in isolated places, and always she collected women. She wrote about them like a gourmand describing fine wines. Their fear had flavors, their despair had bouquet. Some were more delicious than others, some lasted longer. She rated them, compared them, described in clinical detail how she fed. It wasn't a physical process, she simply absorbed their emotions. Being near her, being in her presence was enough. She drained them slowly, savoring them, until there was nothing left. And then she moved on to the next place, the next name, the next batch of victims. The journal mentioned something else, too, a weakness. Fire. She was terrified of fire. It was the only thing that could truly kill her. She'd nearly died in a hotel fire in San Francisco 20 years ago and had been obsessed with preventing it ever since. The house had no fireplaces, no gas lamps, only candles and oil lamps, carefully controlled. I had my weapon. The next time Mrs. Mercer left the house, I went back up to the 3rd floor. The women looked worse than before, more hollow, more broken. The emaciated one wouldn't even look at me. "She's feeding more now," the woman with spectacles said. "Since you arrived, she's excited. Fresh fear tastes better." "I have a plan, but I need your help." I told them what I'd learned, about the journals, about the fire, about how we could burn the house down around her. "She'll kill us if we fail," the Spanish woman said. "She's killing us anyway, just slowly." They looked at each other. I saw something I hadn't seen before in their eyes. Hope. Dangerous, desperate hope. "What do you need us to do?" I chose my moment carefully. 3 nights later, Mrs. Mercer mentioned she would be visiting the old mine in the morning, something she did occasionally, she said, to ensure no one was poking around where they shouldn't. "I'll be gone most of the day," she said. "You'll have the house to yourself." Perfect. That night, I lay in bed and listened to her moving around upstairs. Around midnight, her footsteps finally stopped. I waited another hour, then crept from my room with the kitchen knives, the matches, and the rope I'd gathered. First, I went back up to the 3rd floor and freed the women. Their chains had no locks. Mrs. Mercer didn't need locks when her prisoners were too weak to walk far. I gave them knives and led them downstairs. "We need to work fast," I whispered. "We start fires in multiple rooms. We saturate everything we can with lamp oil. When the house is burning, we run for the desert and don't look back." "She'll wake up. She'll know." "Maybe, but by then it'll be too late." We moved through the house like ghosts, pouring oil on curtains, carpets, furniture. I sent the women to the 1st floor while I took the 2nd. I soaked everything I could reach, working my way down the hall toward Mrs. Mercer's room. Her door was closed. I could hear her breathing inside, a strange sound that was too slow, too deep to be human. My hand shook as I doused her door with oil. Then I struck a match. The fire caught immediately, racing up the door with a hungry roar. I ran down the hall, lighting matches and tossing them as I went. Behind me, I heard a scream that was not human, that rose and rose until it shattered the windows. She was awake. I flew down the stairs. The 1st floor was already burning, flames racing across the oil-soaked floor. The 3 women were outside on the porch, their faces orange in the firelight. "Run!" I screamed. We ran into the desert, stumbling over rocks and scrub. Behind us, the boarding house burned like a torch against the night sky. And from inside came screaming, such terrible screaming, words in languages I didn't know, and sounds that weren't words at all. We were maybe 50 yards away when the front door exploded outward. Mrs. Mercer stood in the doorway, her beautiful dress burning, her perfect hair ablaze. But she wasn't dying fast enough. She started walking toward us. Her face was melting, her skin blackening and cracking, but she kept coming. And her eyes, God, her eyes were still alive, still hungry, still fixed on us with an intensity that froze my blood. "You stupid, stupid girls," she said, her voice like grinding stone. "Did you think fire would kill me? I've burned before. I've always survived. And now I'm going to make you suffer in ways you can't imagine. I'm going to keep you alive for years, decades, and I'm going to feed on your agony every single day until there's nothing left of your minds but screaming." She was getting closer. Behind her, the house collapsed in a shower of sparks, and still she came on. "The mine," the Spanish woman gasped. "She said she came from the mine. Maybe—" She didn't need to finish. We all ran toward the dark shape of the mine entrance, that gaping mouth in the hillside. Mrs. Mercer followed, still burning, still impossibly alive. The mine was a black throat leading down into the earth. We plunged into it, stumbling in the darkness, our hands scraping against rough stone. Behind us, I could hear her coming, could see the hellish light of her burning body illuminating the tunnel. "Deeper!" I gasped. "We have to go deeper!" We ran until we couldn't run anymore, until the tunnel narrowed and twisted, and we were lost in absolute darkness. We huddled together, trying not to breathe too loudly, listening. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, the crackle of burning flesh. "I can smell you," Mrs. Mercer's voice echoed through the tunnels. "I can taste your fear. It's exquisite. You've made yourselves so delicious." The light from her burning body appeared around a corner. She was still on fire, her flesh charred and peeling, exposing something underneath that wasn't muscle or bone, but something else entirely, something that writhed and glistened in the firelight. We backed away, deeper into the mine, and then the Spanish woman grabbed my arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Listen." I heard it, a creaking sound, the groan of stressed timber. The mine was old, unstable, the mine that had collapsed 10 years ago, killing 30 men. Or maybe she had collapsed it. Maybe she'd brought it down on top of them when they'd tried to kill her. And maybe she could do it again. I looked at the other women. They understood. "We have to make her angry," I said. "Angry enough to lose control." Mrs. Mercer was getting closer, her ruined face split in a grin. "You can't escape me," she said. "I've been feeding on women like you for over 100 years. You're nothing. You're cattle. You're pathetic," I shouted, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "You're a monster who preys on desperate women because you're too weak to face anyone with real power. You're a coward and a leech, and when this mine comes down on top of you, no one will remember you existed." Her face contorted with rage. The flames around her flared brighter, hotter. "I am ancient," she shrieked. "I was old when this land was young. I have fed on thousands of your kind, and I will feed on thousands more. I am eternal." She rushed at us, moving with impossible speed. But as she did, the tunnel shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The wooden supports groaned. "Run!" the woman with spectacles screamed. We ran back the way we'd come, racing toward the entrance. Behind us, Mrs. Mercer's screams turned to rage and then to terror as the mountain began to move. The tunnel collapsed. I felt the shockwave, the rush of air and dust. Something hit my back, and I fell, skidding across the stone. When I looked back, the tunnel was gone, just a wall of rock and broken timber where it had been. And from somewhere beneath it, muffled but clear, I heard her screaming, still alive, still trapped, still screaming. We pulled ourselves out of the mine entrance as the sun rose over the desert, painting Silence Creek in shades of gold and red. The boarding house was nothing but smoking ruins. The mine entrance had partially collapsed, but the screaming continued, fainter now, but there. "Will she die?" the emaciated woman asked. "I don't know, but she's buried under a mountain, and she's afraid of fire. We burned her. Maybe that's enough." It wasn't enough. I knew it in then, but it was all we had. We walked to redemption, taking turns supporting each other. It took us 3 days, and by the time we arrived, we were more dead than alive. The people there took us in, fed us, gave us water and beds and sympathy. When the marshal asked what happened, I told him the truth, all of it. He didn't believe me, of course. He thought we'd been held by a madwoman and had escaped. He sent men to investigate, but when they got to Silence Creek, they found nothing but ruins and a collapsed mine, and no body. The other women recovered slowly. The Spanish woman, her name was Carmen, eventually went back to her family in Mexico. The woman with spectacles, Judith, stayed in Redemption and married a shopkeeper. The third woman, whose name I never learned, died 2 weeks after we escaped. She just closed her eyes one night and didn't open them again. As for me, I took the first coach out of New Mexico and never looked back. 6 months later. I'm writing this in a boarding house in Denver, 6 months after I escaped Silence Creek. I have a job as a bookkeeper now, a small room, a quiet life. I should be grateful, but I can't sleep, because 3 nights ago I received a letter. It had no return address, and the handwriting was spidery and familiar. Inside was a single photograph of me.
And underneath, in that same spidery hand, I'm still hungry, dear Sarah, and I'm very patient. I'll see you soon. I burned the letter and the photograph immediately. I tell myself it's impossible. She's dead, or trapped, or whatever passes for death for things like her. But sometimes, late at night, I hear singing, and sometimes I smell roses and decay. And I know, with a certainty that lives in my bones, that she's coming. I should have trusted my instincts that first day in Mr. Thornton Graves' office. I should have walked away when I felt that cold spider of warning crawl up my spine. I should have listened to the Mexican woman on the stage. I should have turned around when the driver's hands shook on the reins. I should have run the first night when I heard the singing. I should have trusted what my blood was telling me, that some places are wrong, some people are monsters, and no amount of money or hope or desperation is worth your life. But I didn't listen, and now I'm looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life, however long that might be. Because she's out there somewhere, digging herself out, healing, hunting, and she's still hungry. If you're reading this, if you've made it this far, I want you to remember something. Your instincts exist for a reason. That cold feeling in your gut, that voice in your head that says something is wrong, that urge to run even when you can't explain why, those things are trying to keep you alive. Listen to them, because I didn't. And now I never sleep soundly. I never feel safe. I never stop looking over my shoulder. And sometimes, late at night, I hear her voice in my dreams, whispering, "I'm coming, Sarah. I'm coming, and when I find you, we're going to have so much time together, forever and ever and ever." I should have trusted my instincts. God help me, I should have trusted my instincts. To anyone who might visit Silence Creek, don't. That boarding house may be ruins, but the mine is still there. And if you listen carefully at night, you can still hear something singing in the darkness. Something old and hungry and patient. Something waiting.